Everyone, and welcome to tonight's Dóchas webinar. I'd like to begin firstly to welcome the traditional owners of the land. So I would like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people, the traditional custodians of the land that I am hosting this webinar from. And I would also like to acknowledge the lands on which you are watching this webinar, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So tonight I would really like to welcome our three contributors. So we have got Donna, James, and Natalie joining us tonight, and we're going to talk about returning to Ireland, getting their perspective from their personal experiences on returning to Ireland. And interestingly, for Natalie, who made the move back home and has actually came back to Australia again. So I think it's going to be a lovely evening and a great opportunity to discuss everyone's experiences and maybe get some advice along the way. So yeah, look, I think let's just start off by everyone maybe introducing themselves. So Donna, I'm going to pinpoint you. Donna was previously president of the Irish Support Agency and a great friend of ours. So Donna, if you don't mind, maybe just introducing yourself and letting everyone know about when you returned and how that's going for you so far.
Okay, I was in Australia for 18 years and I'm home just over 12 months now. So I've been home the guts of a good year. The decision behind it was, I always said if I was made redundant that I would come home. And we actually, me and my boss, put in a paper to make that redundancy happen. And from the day and hour that the paper went in, I started to panic, where it's kind of, oh my God, have I done the right thing? But you know, once the redundancy was granted, I knew I was on my way home. Now, leaving Australia was really hard. I think I cried from the day and hour that I knew I was going home till I came back. And then the tears this side were different tears, because it was actually really nice to come home and spend time with family. The move in itself was quite stressful. It took me, I started packing at Christmas and I was leaving in May. So I got all that stuff sorted. It's heart-wrenching to leave.
Yeah.
But again, the difference this side makes it all worthwhile. It really does, all worthwhile. So I've settled in really, really well. I love being home. It has its challenges. I will not say it doesn't. It does. And I'll give you just a classic example. I got a beautiful framed or unframed poster from the ISA, a beautiful print. And I left it in September to be framed, and I got it back at the start of December. So things sort of go very, very slowly in a small town. I mean, the town itself is probably 8,000, 10,000 people in it now, and it is a very small town. And I think you forget, because I was in Sydney or Australia for so long, that everybody knows you here. I don't know anybody, but everybody knows you.
Yes.
It sort of freaks me out a bit, because you know, people would speak to me in the street, and you're home now, and it's, I have no idea who they are. And it's really, really scary. You know, just for me, it's randoms, like random people.
Yeah.
So I find that a bit of a struggle, because you're used to anonymity in Australia, where you know, you only people who know you. So that has been interesting, and that's been a bit of a challenge, because again, small town mentality, they want to know your business and they like to know your business. And you know, for somebody that has been away for 18 years, that's a struggle to come back into. Yeah. But that said, you know, it's worth it. It definitely is worth it now.
Absolutely. And I can imagine there's adjustments in every area, and we'll maybe dig a little bit deeper into that later. James, what about yourself then? I believe you're a little bit longer than Donna, so you're further down the line.
Yeah, I guess in years, yeah. So I was in Sydney for 16 years, 2000 to 2016. So I'm back just over 6 years. Actually, our anniversary was May the 10th, just gone, 6 years. And it's funny, Donna, listening to yourself, you know, you're a year back and you're feeling pretty good about it. And I'm trying to think back to when I was a year back. I wasn't feeling great, to be honest. It took me a lot longer to settle. And if you ask my wife, Anne-Marie, after a year, I think she settled really quickly. She was into the groove with schools. She decided to stop working, stayed at home, settled in the children. So we had 3 children when we returned. They were 8, 6, and 3. And yeah, she was right into it. She had her brother and sister living nearby, and was very settled. And I remember driving home one time and asking her how she was getting on, and she was nearly crying with happiness. You know, she was just so happy to be back. I struggled a little bit more. I was lived in Sydney, very into the lifestyle, surfing every day, loved the lifestyle. So it probably took me, I'd say, 3 or 4 years to really adjust to the seasons, to even just adjust my life routines, to, you know, now I work more during the winter, go inside, get the work done, and then this is my favorite time of the year, you know, when it's opening up, and I love road trips and stuff like that, you know. So yeah, that's been pretty interesting. So I had to learn a lot of patience, you know, as Donna said, not just with the logistics and the bureaucracy and that sort of thing, but patience with myself, to trust that I was in the right place, and that everything was going to work out. So I think, you know, for us, when we decided, like I said, our kids were young, it was getting to the point where the eldest, being 8, we're kind of thinking it'd be a wrench to take her out when she's any older. And so it was a very good decision to bring them back to the place that we grew up, mainly for family, for them, for ourselves, to spend time with our family. But once we made that decision, we had to really switch on, look forward, try not to look back and compare to an imaginary life and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm enjoying it now. I'm writing a book about it. It's a great experience. I'm very big into having no regrets, and into mindset and personal development. And a big life change like this definitely makes you think about what's important, what your priorities are, and that sort of thing. So yeah, so that's been a big one for me. So yeah, settling.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think that's interesting if you're in a couple, that one person is adjusting that little bit quicker than the other. And I've definitely heard from friends in similar position where one's kind of considering, should we go back? Like, 12 months in, have we made the worst decision of our lives? And the other one saying, you know, give it time, it'll be fine, we have to make it work. So I think it would be really great to hear from Natalie, if you can maybe introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about when you moved home and when you decided to come back to Australia.
Yep. Hi, my name is Natalie, and yeah, I moved to Australia in 2011 and I left in 2019, so I was there for 11 years. I think the decision we made to go home was because we'd had a little boy, and like that, you know, wanting him to be around family and all of that. So we got home, and I think I'd say I might have been home 2 weeks. And I said, oh my goodness, what have I done? I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Why have I come back? My little boy was finding it hard to settle, I suppose, you know, and just trying to get him back into a routine. And then I think for the first 6 months, I think my husband settled in straight away at the start. He was loving the fact that he was home. He was loving life. Everything was rosy in the garden. It was great. He wanted to come home for a long time, a lot more than I did. I think I had constantly been putting him off. When 2 years, we'll go now 2 years. And then I think after we had our son, he was like, right, come on, it's now or never. So I was like, okay, yeah, let's go. And I think at the time I was ready as well. And then I think for the first 6 months, I think I cried myself to sleep every night. Just not being able to find my feet, just not being able to settle back. I think I found it a little bit hard as well. I had moved back to his hometown, not my own. And my best friends and stuff had of course, typically as I had moved back to Ireland, had moved to Dublin for work. So there was, not having that connection around was hard. And then COVID hit in March. And I just kind of said, right, that's it. We don't have an option. We have no choice. We have to try and not make it work. And that's when the wheels turned. Then that's when my husband kind of started having doubts about being at home, and he then started finding it really hard to settle. Whereas I kind of had, got the mindset, that's it, we're here, and let's try and get on with it now and do make the best of a bad situation, really, because I suppose, with COVID, nobody knew at the time what was going on. As the time went on, he didn't settle. He kind of never got over that feeling. And then he returned 7 months before I did. He returned in May last year. We were supposed to follow him out in September, and then COVID hit here in Australia, and they went back into lockdown here. So I didn't actually make it back out till January this year, because I just was not going to put my little boy into quarantine, not for 2 weeks, because he's a busy little boy, and I was like, no, I just couldn't put him through that. So ended up waiting it out for a while, and then made it back in January.
Wow, what an experience. Many highs and lows, I can imagine. And look, I think for everyone in the world, especially those Irish living here in Australia, a lot of people did question whether is now the time to go back to Ireland or not. And from what I can hear from all three of you, deciding and driving factors for home was family. And that may be that for kids to spend time with their grandparents or grow up with other cousins, or for ourselves to maybe see our parents getting that little bit older over FaceTime is tough to see. And you do have that feeling of it's now or never. So Donna, can I go back to you? So you mentioned that you were packing up for many months, and that you had put in that request at work to get redundancy. So did you have doubts along the way? Like, were you thinking seriously at any point, am I doing the right thing? Should I put the brakes on here?
Absolutely. There was a couple of times where I went, you go into autopilot. I think from my end, I went into autopilot, and I'm pretty organized. I like to have all my boxes ticked and all the rest. And there was a couple of times where I went, am I really doing this? And it was that heart-stopping moment where it was kind of, oh, do you really want to do this? Is this something that you really want to do? And I discussed it with my family. Now, one of my driving reasons, again, was COVID, and that being locked into Australia, not knowing if you'd get out or whatever. And that was probably the ultimate driving force for me. The redundancy was off the back of that, but it was kind of not knowing if I could get out. And again, you have that fear, and everybody who has been away or is away always has that fear of that phone call, and you do not want that phone call. It has to be the worst phone call that you'll ever receive in your life. So, whenever I sat down and talked to the family about coming home, first thing my sister said, "You're mad. Why would you come home? Why would you come home?" And I think for me, and probably the same as you, James, you've been away for so long, people don't understand what would take you away from that lifestyle. But I do believe you have to give it a crack. Absolutely give it a crack. And me personally, I can't have one foot in each country. I'm home now and I have to go with it. And I'm loving it. Like, I am loving it. And like I say, it has its challenges. I think I have lots of connections in Australia as well. So I get all the biz from them. I had a phone call from the lads that I used to work with the other day. They're growing their business in America and Europe. And, are talking about maybe getting me on board to do Ireland and Europe. There's all of that goes on. But for me personally, it was really difficult to leave. Like, Australia's home for me. I grew up in Australia. That's how I look at Australia. I grew up there. But now is the right time for me personally to come home and spend that time with the family, because you don't get that back. You really, really don't get that back. And for me, that was really, really important.
Well, I'm really glad for you, and for everyone on the call. It sounds like you made that journey home on your own terms as well, because as you touched on, Donna, unfortunately, in our personal lives and through work, we all know of those that had to go home in crisis. They got that dreaded call and didn't have the long goodbye to Australia, to be able to kind of bid it farewell and leave with a smile on your face as well, knowing that you've left when you did.
And I do think it's Katerina, I do agree. I think it's really important that you give Australia the long goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
I prepped from December to May.
Yeah.
So I gave it a good 5 months, and I had a great 5 months in those times too.
Oh,
but you do have to give it the long goodbye.
Yeah, and I think you owe it to your time in Australia as well, especially as most of us have done our growing up here, and we're very different people from when we first left Ireland, maybe, to when you're returning. And James, how was that with kids then, to do that and explain to them about returning to Ireland, a country that they have maybe just visited at times?
Yeah, it was easier than we thought it was going to be, actually. I suppose I was 23, I think, when I got to Sydney, and something a little bit higher when I left, 40 or so. Like, when we decided, similar to you, Donna, we decided we were home on holiday, which is a dangerous thing as well, right? So you're going to weddings, you're having a great time, and then you're thinking you're missing everybody. And we always used to go back to Sydney and go, just let that feeling settle. Don't make any big decisions for 2 or 3 months till you get back to Sydney. But this time we had been thinking about it for quite a while, and we made the decision in the car. We had left the kids with their grandparents, and we were driving home from a wedding down south of Ireland. And we made the decision, but we said, right, 9 months, we'll come back for next summer. So we had plenty of time to organise, and we put a little countdown on the fridge to get the kids excited, 120 days till go back to Ireland. So they were actually very excited. As I said, the 8-year-old was probably our biggest concern. Our middle daughter, Erin, is also, she likes routine and she likes structure and that sort of thing. So we were also a little bit concerned about, uprooting her. But we built a lot of excitement around it. And in terms of doubt around the decision, I don't think we had, we were so excited. That excitement was just the overriding thing until probably the days around departure, where I wouldn't say doubt was the emotion, it was just real sadness. Like, we as you say, I love neuroscience and how the brain works and the stages of development and happiness and all that sort of stuff, and your life when you're in your 20s, it's all about pleasure. It's all about, getting out there, taking risks, learning and everything. So it's overriding, your focus is on having a good time. And so Australia is a great place to do that. But then when you have kids, you move from pleasure to purpose. And both of those things, pleasure and purpose, are big factors in our happiness, right? So we seek pleasure and we seek purpose. And I suppose when you get to have kids, get a bit older, you seek a bit more purpose than pleasure. Pendulum swings back towards the middle a little bit. So, and we lived across from a nursing home for 5 years. So I used to look at the nursing home and I'd see people going in, and sometimes they didn't come out. And so I was like, Jesus, do I want to die here? And I really didn't. I don't want to die in general. Who does? But I definitely felt like I don't think Australia is the place where I want to. I think I'd regret You know, and like you said, Donna, you know, you want to have a crack at it, but you want to have a decent crack at it. And I feel like, you know, Natalie coming back during COVID, that's an additional challenge, you know, that you don't need, you know, so a decent crack at it is having a few years, being patient, and having a crack at it during a normal time, I think, as well. So it's a very difficult thing to do, but it's very rewarding. Sorry, Katerina, I've gone off your question a little bit in terms of the kids. So the kids, you know, now when we ask them, you know, we might sit around the dinner table and say, you know, do you remember the house in Australia? And my son, who's now 9, doesn't remember anything, right? So he was 3. Can't remember, you know, I'm like, do you remember the house? We had a little swimming pool, right? I can't believe I had a pool for you. You can't even remember the pool, right? But anyway, he can't remember that. And the 2 girls, we're lucky because we're all Australian citizens, so we have the option. We didn't feel trapped, and we have a plan B if we want. But we're planning to go to Sydney next year, and my eldest daughter is very excited. She has some memories of it and some pals she still keeps in touch with. For the most part, they feel completely Irish. We look back at old videos and they have Australian accents. It sounds weird to us now, you know. They don't really remember a whole lot. The eldest one has a little bit of a connection, but they're Irish. And I think, you know, when they started school here, their accent changed almost immediately because kids will do anything to fit in. You know, so that was a big thing. And for Anne-Marie, my wife, fitting in, like when we had got to that stage in Sydney where she was starting to be at school with the mums, and she never quite felt like she was completely fitting in.
Wow.
Completely, it's just different, you know, just completely, not anything bad, just different sense of humor, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I think the kids are remarkably resilient, but a lot of what they think comes from you. So if you are positive and you as a couple are happy, then they'll be happy anywhere.
Yeah. And they're picking up on that energy. And I think for kids, as long as they feel safe and secure, then that's huge.
Exactly.
So I think I'm just going to throw it out to all 3 of you around how the move met or didn't meet your expectations. So one, I think you had said there, James, about holidays. Yeah, not realistic to think what life could be like when you're in Ireland on a holiday, because everyone makes a huge effort and they love you and they do love us regardless, but it's not reality. So especially when we're popping home at Easter or in the summer at Christmas. But yeah, how did the move meet or not meet your expectations when you were leaving Australia, what you thought Ireland was going to be like?
I'll have a go. I would say, looking back, I'm trying to think of what expectations we had. I mean, we just expected to be back with family. Probably didn't recognize, for me, the extent to which I'm just going to speak for my family. My family, for example, had moved on. Obviously, been away 16 years. They have their own lives, their own routines. So those everyday conversations that you've missed, I still struggle with that, to be honest. Well, I didn't have any explicit expectations. It was just different to what I expected. With my folks, relationship with them is great. They were over in Sydney a few times, so they spent, you know, 2 or 3 months at a time there. So that's been great. So it depends on what area of life, I suppose, you're talking about. Like overall, I'd say, you know, expected the weather to be crap, but actually not as bad as I thought it was. And first few years, I sort of had not a great attitude. I sort of kind of resisted the weather and the seasons. For example, I was trying to get out in the winter, and now I kind of enjoy getting in by the fire and just, you know, hunkering down and you know, getting away from the world in a way, and getting a little bit of peace is nice. But it was something that I really had to adjust my expectations and my life my life to. And then there's other things, you know, when you make a big change like that, and you basically you do a spring clean, like, you know, not just of your physical stuff, but of your mental stuff, like, you know, and it's a great thing for that in terms of like resetting and going, I'm going to ditch all this stuff that, you know, actually doesn't really make me happy. And I'm gonna, you know, I've got this little thing behind me, which is live simply. And you know, we bought a caravan, and we do these like really simple things with the kids, and so that's been great. And I wouldn't necessarily attribute that to Ireland, but I attribute it to uprooting your life and recreating it in the middle. Like, you know, it's easy to do that when you're 20, because that's what you're meant to do. But when you're 40, it's a great thing to do, because you just toss out lots of predefined beliefs, you know, lots of trash, and you do a good spring clean. So that's been good. But yeah.
And what about you, Donna? You'd mentioned, you know, how long sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. We're used to many options here and things happening quickly.
I think that's what I struggle with most, is it's, you know, they talk about Fiji time. Well, it's Ballycastle time here, you know, that's where I'm from. It's just, you know, everything is a go slow, and having the options in Australia and Sydney, it blows my mind, you know. And sometimes I think, does people not want the money? You know, you're trying to pay them for work and you're going, why are you, you know, it really blows me away at times. But again, it's about having that patience and going, right, you're in a different place entirely now. The expectation there, you know, you have to manage your own expectations is how I would look at it. I think, James, like you, unlike you, actually, I feel less Irish now than I did in Australia. And it took me an awful long time to actually acknowledge that and work that out. It's probably taken me a good 8 months, because I had such a big Irish connection out there. And, you know, you'd lift the phone in Australia and go, it's only me. And they know straight away who it is, you know, because of the Irish accent and because of that. But it took me a good 8 months to acknowledge that fact, that I actually feel less Irish now than I did in Australia. And I still struggle with that. And, you know, you have your community here, which is great. You know, everybody's into everything, and big GAA and festivals and all of that. But it's different. It's really, really different. And I can't really put it into words how less connected I feel being home than I did in Australia. That's the one biggest thing that I have struggled with. And like I say, I have acknowledged it. I just don't know what to do with it now, because I don't know. Again, Irish community in Australia is absolutely amazing. They're the best people in the world, and you just get on with it and batter on and help out where you can. But here it's different. I think it's different because you're home, and you're just like everybody else.
And you're probably just trying to find your position as well, and where you
that has been my biggest struggle, and I'll be honest, that really has been a huge struggle for me.
And look, I think it's really important to mention that. And maybe when we do come home, as I said, the world revolves a little bit around the visitor. And I have had friends that have gone before me, which I think is really important. And especially for those that maybe haven't had friends listening to this conversation, and that they're starting to manage my expectations, because like James, over the years, I've just said, I don't want to grow old here. I'm just not ready to leave yet, but home is always the main goal for me. But having friends go through the move, and they're saying, nothing's happening quickly with paperwork, struggling to find a doctor to take me on, you know, all of these things are helping. Or, you know, the gang don't really meet up as much anymore. It's not like before we moved to Australia and it was every Saturday night out. They've got their kids and they see their family on a Sunday, because here, when you don't have maybe family here, for most people, your friends are your family. So
That's right.
Yeah, they had a lot more support here than maybe it took them to move home to realize, actually, we've got our immediate family now, but our friends back in Ireland have got their own lives. So it's really interesting to hear the good and the bad. And I think for Natalie as well, like that is an experience for a lot of couples too, where one person has to give it up and say, okay, I'm going to give it a go in a new town or a new village where I'm an outsider. And maybe if we're not doing the socializing that we were in our 20s, it's harder to meet people, it's harder to fit in. Like, I guess for Donna or James, like, what advice, like, is there anything, any key advice that you would give to someone now and that may be tuning in tonight or looking back on this webinar as to if they're struggling with the decision and they want to move home, what would you tell them? Would you like to go first, Donna?
Sure. I mean, like I said earlier, give it a crack. You know, worst case scenario, if you're fortunate enough, like most of us are, we have the passport, you can always go back.
Yeah.
But whenever I say give it a crack, you have to give it a good crack. Leave all expectations of Australia in Australia and embrace Ireland. Like, absolutely embrace it. And that's probably the only advice I would give it. And don't compare. You can't compare apples and oranges. You really, really can't, you know. And I've caught myself a couple of times saying, but back in Australia, we did A, B, and C, and that has to go.
Yeah.
You know, you can say that internally to yourself, but externally, not a great idea.
No, because you're going to get very quickly. You're not in Australia now, Donna.
Absolutely. They're not long in telling you.
Yeah.
But like I say, that would be my advice. If you're thinking about it, give it a go, but you have to give it a real go. You know, there's no point in, I have a friend again who just doesn't know what to do, whether Australia is the right place for her. Ireland. She's home here in Ireland at the minute and doesn't know what to do. And it's kind of, well, you have to embrace, you have to, you know, go with it. And, you know, a lot of people are surprised how quickly I've settled in, but I think I was of the right mindset, you know, and that's really important. You have to be of the right mindset to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we will all give it a crack away from tonight. And what about yourself, James?
Yeah, I think for someone who's trying to decide, it probably depends on where you are in that process. So the first thing would be, and this will be a piece of advice for the whole thing, would be patient, don't rush it. So if you're just at that early stage of deciding, like this is a heart, you know, Donna, you rightly say mindset. The time for the mindset is later, but I'd say tune into what your heart really wants. So yeah, you know, I when I came back, I did a diploma in life coaching, and we do certain techniques like, you know, life canvas and stuff like that, or life wheel, and it's a bit corny, but you know, it also works. It's there for a reason, and you write down the areas of your life, and you think about what's important to you in those areas. And you know, you might go through a process of comparing Ireland to Australia, and like we did this, right? We actually had a spreadsheet, you know, Ireland versus Australia, lifestyle. We scored it, and Australia won every time, right? But we changed the spreadsheet so that Ireland won because our heart was telling us Ireland.
That
right?
was the decision. Yeah.
But on paper, it was Australia as the winner, right? Finance, you know, lifestyle, Australia wins, right? Yeah, exactly. So family, you know, Ireland wins. So family became the 90% weighted one because our heart was a constant, like that was the cry from the heart going, Ireland, right? Yeah. So there's a process there. You shouldn't rush it. But before you make a decision, any big decision, it's getting clear on what your values are, what's important to you. And so I would say don't rush that, sit on it for as long as you feel you need to, and the decision will make itself eventually, I think. And then once you decide, yeah, give it a crack. Could be your mantra. I had a mantra in around 2016, 2017, when I was back. It was GRIT. It was an acronym. I love acronyms. GRIT stood for gratitude, relentlessness, intention, and trust. And I remember calling a mate of mine, Andre, who I grew up with, and you know, I was complaining about the weather and stuff like that. And he's the guy who said to me, "Be patient with yourself. you're in the right place. And that's where the trust of that grit word came from, was that I needed to just trust that everything would be okay. And Donna has already referred to mindset. I'd probably say if you have decided, start to meditate, switch on your mindset, and write, or start to keep a journal. I never kept a journal or a diary in my life, but it was very, very therapeutic when I was here to be able to write down some of the shit that I was thinking, basically, like just complaining about the weather, and then you see it on paper and you're like, get a grip yourself, you know, get a raincoat, that sort of stuff, you know. So you can give yourself therapy just by writing down stuff. And Donna, I didn't actually realize until you said it, but I feel the same way when I go up to, say, the local GA club or events like that, where they're so Irish and I feel like I'm not quite there. I'm not Irish, but then I think I like being different. I like not being quite Irish, so I try and embrace the difference. That's the price you pay of going away and seeing a little bit of the world, and, you know, yourself and stuff like that. Maybe you'll never be quite Irish, and try and focus on that and avoid comparing. Enjoy the fact that you're different. And yeah, patience is probably the word I'd like to end on. Patience.
All right. Yeah. Well, look, I think I am going to throw it out to anyone in the group here. If you have any comments, or if you'd like to ask questions to any of the contributors tonight.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question to anyone, really. I know we spoke a lot about making that decision, and as James just said, being patient and taking your time and deliberating over that. Did anyone feel that the decision, a part of it was a little bit of obligation, or were you able to distinguish what you truly wanted versus what you thought other people wanted of you?
I think, I'll just have a quick answer to that. I think when you've been away for so long, you do feel obliged to come back, but that has to be your decision. That can't be anybody else's decision. And for me, I didn't feel obliged to go back, and I didn't feel I had to go back. I think I wanted to go back. Now that I'm home, I see that my sister has taken up all the slack for the last, particularly in the last 5-6 years, that I haven't been able to do. And it's actually nice to be able to give back. But I didn't feel obliged to come. I understand what you're saying. And you do sort of feel it, but it has to be your decision, is what I would say on that. Mm-hmm. It can't be anybody else's decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think obligation is probably a feeling and a factor in your consideration. You can't escape that feeling of obligation, but it can't be the deciding factor. And for us with children, it was more an obligation to them. We felt that one of the reasons why I think people love Irish people is because they're so friendly. They've got a great sense of humor. They know how to work. They're grounded, and we felt obligated to bring up our children in the same foundation that we had, and that was the obligation. And the fact that Donna, you were there 18 years, I think, and I've been there 16 years. If obligation was a factor, it probably would have got us back sooner. So, and it shouldn't be, but obviously it would be a consideration, but not the deciding factor.
Lovely, thank you. Well, we don't seem to have any extra questions here, so I would just like to let any of the listeners know that all of the previous Dóchas webinars can be found on our YouTube channel, and we have explored a wide range of topics relating to mental health and well-being, so make sure to check that out. And we've also done fantastic video recordings with Crosscare, who look at more of the logistical side of returning to Ireland. And yeah, I think that is really important, that you consider the emotional impact as well as the logistics and how you can make that work. So look, thank you for joining us this morning with you, tonight with us, and think that's been really powerful. So wishing you all the best and enjoy the summer weather now. See you all.